In late 2021, DC Comics took a massive swing on the Superman franchise, as late in the year, Clark Kent took a group of heroes that he dubbed the Authority over to the planet of Warworld. Superman and the Authority's mission here was simple. They needed to liberate the slaves that were being held captive on Warworld by Mongol. However, what they thought would be a quick detour turned into a months-long epic saga where Superman was even enslaved at one point. Thankfully, Superman has now returned from the planet of Warworld, and now it's time to go ahead and celebrate the return of the big blue Boy Scout over to the DC universe. My name is Ariko Braddock, and today we're going to go ahead and talk about Superman Kal-El Return Special number 1. But before we dive deeper into the video, I want to go ahead and encourage you to consider subscribing to the channel if you enjoy our content, and please make sure to go ahead and hit that like button as well. I want to go ahead and start off our review by reading off the solicitation text that DC Comics wrote in order to catch you up to speed on everything that's been happening in the world of both Superman and Action Comics. Kal-El has returned from his long sojourn to Warworld, but what ramifications does this hold for the broader DC universe? In this special issue, we'll spotlight Kal-El's reunion with the Dark Knight Jimmy Olsen, the Justice League, and Lex Luthor? Plus, witness the never-before-revealed look at the moment leading to Superman's abduction by Pariah in the Dark Crisis event. The march towards Action Comics 1050 continues in this essential special volume. So I want to go ahead and kick off this issue, or kick off our review here today, by showing off the gorgeous cover for this special over from Dan Mora. Here is a look at the Superman Kal-El Return Special number 1 cover from Dan Mora. I love this kind of iconic looking Superman image. And I wanted to go ahead and introduce the first story in the issue, starting with the creative team. This story is called The Concert That Ate Gotham. It's written by Mark Waid, illustrated by Clayton Henry, and colored by Marcelo Maiolo, lettered by Dave Sharpe. So I want to talk a little bit about this story and about Mark Waid's writing in general over at DC Comics over the past couple months. I really feel like Mark Waid's writing has been a little bit maybe too bombastic for its own good in certain cases. This is a really short story, so it's hard to kind of get your point between Superman and Batman. That's going to be a little bit different from so many of these anthology stories that DC continues to publish just month after month, which is a little bit monotonous. And the tone for this issue is just a little bit odd. I feel like Batman has been acting out of character in this story. He seems too cheery and too willing to go along with what kind of Superman is proposing throughout the issue, which kind of broke some of my immersion with the story in general, just from the script perspective. And the one kind of saving grace about this story is some of the subject matter. I don't want to give away who we have here, but we have a villain in this story that was introduced in the Doom Patrol comic book run, which was just a fantastic story. So there is a joy in watching, Superman and Batman team up to fight an absurdist Doom Patrol villain. Plus, we have some beautiful artwork in the issue from Clayton Henry. However, I think this story really kind of takes a nosedive in terms of quality, especially when we get towards the end, because there's a few moments with Superman and Batman in plain clothes where the two are kind of, catching up with each other. And it just doesn't feel like the characterization is here for Batman specifically. I'm reminded of like that Justice League, animated cartoon show where Batman would always have some sort of animosity in Superman, even in the moments where they're kind of relaxing with each other. And I just wish a little bit more of that hard edge was present from some of Batman's dialogue throughout the issue. I do have to say, though, the art from Clayton Henry is really gorgeous. Clayton Henry is so good at expressing characters with a great sense of accuracy. The one thing I will say about Henry's art is I think he does have a tendency to draw like male characters specifically from an anatomy perspective in a very similar basis. But overall, like if you take a look at this page, the way the kind of composition is laid out on the page is really just staggering. And Henry's art, especially over the past couple of years, has always had this intense sense of confidence that has made me really enjoy looking at his comic book art just month after month. So this story is a bit of a mixed bag. I think there's, in particular, I think Batman is acting way out of character, which did break my immersion. Let's go ahead and talk about the second story in this collection. This one is called Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen, A Friend in Need. This one is written by Sina Grace, illustrated by Dean Haspiel, colored by Trish Mulvihill, and lettered by Dave Sharpe. So I don't have preview pages for for Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen. So what I wanted to do was show off some art from Dean Haspiel's Red Hook storyline, in order to kind of get you caught up to speed on, what the art is going to look like in the story. So this Superman's Pal Jimmy Olsen story is a really kind of clever story that attempts to utilize, I think, some of the irreverent perspective that, writer Matt Fraction and artist Steve Lieber imbued in their recent Jimmy Olsen series. But sadly, I didn't find that sense of absurdist humor to be quite as present in this particular chapter of the story. Now, as you can tell from this page of the Red Hook, there is some incredibly beautiful art, throughout this issue. The way that Haspiel draws Superman with such a strong perspective along with Jimmy Olsen is absolutely kind of inspiring. It's just the way that this story kind of establishes a surface level aspect for Superman and, Jimmy Olsen with Superman finally, being back on Earth. It didn't hit me the way it did when we got this story kind of similarly interpreted through, Matt Fraction and Lieber's version of this story. I hope that we can see Dean Haspiel's art in more DC Comics because it's such a break from the traditional house style of DC Comics. If you can tell from this page, Haspiel has incredible storytelling and is able to draw, a strong versatility of art. It's great to see somebody who's a little bit more expressive work on Jimmy Olsen as well in terms of some of the artwork, because we just have, a different lens to interpret the DC universe through. So while I thought the writing left something to be desired in this story, the art is just wonderful. And the next story in our Action Comics or our Superman collection here is called Distractions. This one is written by Marv Wolfman, illustrated by Jack Herbert, colored by Alex Guimaraes, and the entire issue is lettered by Dave Sharpe. We also don't have preview pages for this Distraction story, so I want to go ahead and show off an Action Comics 1051 cover from Jack Herbert while we go ahead and talk about this story in earnest. So the thing that I liked about this story kind of right off the bat is how Lois and Clark are having like a sort of second honeymoon after Superman has been, off world for so long. It's really nice to see the duo kind of check in on their relationship. But I think this issue or this particular story after that opening scene kind of started me on the wrong foot because of that odd characterization for Jonathan Kent in particular. It just seemed like he was being, a little too silly, a little too cute. And I was worried that Marv Wolfman didn't quite have the characterization of Jonathan Kent correct. However, as we got deeper into this story and Wolfman introduced a subplot with Lex Luthor, I was really stunned by the harsh level of kind of creativity from this storyline. It brought out, some good aspects of Lex Luthor, some bad aspects of Lex Luthor. And also there's something magical about just seeing the Kent family, Superman, Clark Kent, Lois, and Jonathan just interacting with each other, solving a crime together. And I really think that DC should put more of an emphasis on these characters kind of working together throughout the story. Plus, I really enjoy Jack Herbert's art. I think when you look at DC Comics, you probably picture something that looks like Jack Herbert's rendition of Superman. As you can tell from this kind of variant cover that we're looking at, it's so rendered, so kind of boisterous, and you just can't mistake this figure for anybody other than Superman. So really think there's some incredibly strong characterization from this distraction story, and I think it's actually the best of the bunch of stories in this collection. Let's quickly talk about the last story in the collection. This one is called Home. It's written by Alex Segura, Fico Ossio, Lee Loughridge, and Dave Sharpe. Just to show you what Fico Ossio's artwork looks like, I went ahead and put up a variant cover for Aquaman number 6. So Home is a little bit of a tricky story because this one actually does accomplish some plot for the kind of Action Comics and like Superman title as a whole. This issue is looking to kind of fill in the gaps of where Superman was after he returned from Warworld, but before the events of Dark Crisis or Justice League 75. So watching some of the buildup to that story is a little bit interesting, but I do think this story feels like an afterthought because there's something anticlimactic about Superman being off-world and then Superman coming back from being off-world and then going off-world again. So this story just has so much kind of mental gymnastics and editorial kind of weirdness to work through that I don't even think it's the fault of the creative team that the end result of the story ended up that the way it did. There are some interesting DC guest stars. There's some, interesting moments of history throughout the story. Plus, I really enjoy the artwork from Fico Ossio in particular. I love how expressive Ossio's work is. Ossio is an artist that tends to I would say kind of value like storytelling or framing as opposed to, precise anatomy and characters. And I think it really lends something that's a little bit different from the DC house style here. I really enjoy the way that Ossio draws, not only Superman, but some of these other Justice League characters that show up a little bit later in the issue. It's just a little bit of a shame that this story was so incredibly predictable and there weren't any, moments that got me kind of invested in Superman. I had an idea of where the story was going to go, and it more or less went in that direction, and then it ended. So let's go ahead and talk about this special as a whole. I enjoyed some moments from the Superman Kal-El Return special, number 1, but overall, I did feel like there's all these issues of, Action Comics. There's issues of the, Son of Superman, Jonathan Kent comic book, where we get really great moments between Superman and Clark, that this collection of stories almost feels like an afterthought. There is some really good material here, so if you are a big fan of Superman and you want to really get kind of a grasp on all the characterization that DC has to offer, you probably don't want to miss this issue. But for the average Superman reader, it would probably be a better idea to make sure you're caught up on the events of Action Comics, Superman, and just the Warworld saga. So I want to know what you guys thought about the issue. Did you like this comic more than I did? Let me know down in the comments below. Thank you one last time for checking out the video, and we'll be back very soon for some more excellent comic book content. Thank you guys so much. Bye.